Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Jeodakum series, where we explore the Admiral's Sword, a Korean Joseon Dynasty sword form. Now if you haven't seen the previous episodes of the series, check them out above. So today we'll be talking about the Chotwe and the Jetwe Bangjukse, the initial and secondary retreating postures. Now essentially these are just retreating sword spins, and I personally think that they should be renamed to the retreating posture to the right and the retreating posture to the left, because initial and secondary retreating postures don't really actually mean that much to the user outside of the form. Now if you haven't seen last week's video, the spinning Kyukyukse, then please do go and watch it, because it lays down the groundwork and the basis for today's form. Now like last week, I'll be using a bokken for the demonstrations, because when you're doing spinning forms indoors, then sometimes your footwork isn't always stable, and you don't want to have a live blade in your hands when you have unstable footing, and if a small friend like a toddler, or in my case my bunny, comes running along and you can't stop the sword and you might end up injuring yourself or someone else. So please do stay safe and use a bokken. If you're outdoors in a place where no one will come and interfere with you and you're proficient with the form, then maybe you can use a live blade there. So the Twe Bangjukse form is similar to the spinning Kyukyukse. So the spinning Kyukyukse has 3 steps, and so does the Twe Bangjukse. So the Kyukyukse forms, then the 3 steps are a cross, or the Kyukyukse, 180 to the back and 180 to the front. Now in the Twe Bangjukse, we just mix that up a little bit, and so the first form is the regular Bangjukse, then we do 180 to the front and then 180 to the back. So for the first step, the Bangjukse, then it's often practiced as the typical Bangjukse, the forward high guard, but it can also be done as the mid guard. And this is a really important step because you're trying to retreat to the back, and if you don't stop the attacks coming from the front, as soon as you turn your back, you will get cut down. So doing the Bangjukse here is as a stopgap for any further attacks from the front and prevent them from taking opportunities when you turn, so that you can actually turn and get out of the way. Now the Bangjukse, rather than being done in long stance, it's done in horse stance or in back stance. I personally like the horse stance, but if you prefer back stance, then practice it how it works best for you. Now for the second step, in the Kyukyukse, then you're spinning moving towards the front, and you're spinning towards your back in 180 degrees. Now for the spinning Twe Bangjukse, then we do all of those things in the opposite direction. So we spin 180 degrees to the front, and we spin while moving backwards. So again, the steps are all more or less the same. So look over the shoulder, check that there's no one who's going to attack you while you do your spin and it's safe to do your spin. Then take your front foot and step it 180 degrees around, spinning towards your front open side. And then land back in horse stance again. And in this position, then do a horizontal cut, because you don't want to drop your sword in this position. Your point is to try and repel as many attackers as you can, and if you drop your sword down, well, you're not really going to be repelling anyone, because you want to wave that sword so that they move back. Now the third step is 180 degrees to the back. So you take your other foot and you spin in the same direction towards your back, and you turn that 180 degrees and take that step so that you're facing back towards the direction you started in. So in the spinning Kyukyukse, then it's front and back, and you go facing front, then facing back, and facing front. In the Twe Bangjukse, rather than front and back, you go left and right. So let's say you started facing towards the left. You'll go left, right, and then left. And so you end up facing back in the direction that you started. And so instead of the focus on the attack like in the Kyukyukse, in the Bangjukse, then the focus is on repelling and mobility. So you want to spin so that you can move while spinning, and also have that sword in horizontal cuts to push people away. What you want them to see is a sword so that they move out of the way, and the power of the sword doesn't actually matter that much, because you're not trying to cut them down, you're just trying to get them to scram. Now often the Twe Bangjukse finishes with a Hyanghu Kyukyukse, the offensive posture to the rear. Because you're moving backwards, then you spin, 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 and then you want to open up the pathway. So if there are any enemies left towards the back, then using the Hyanghu Kyukyukse is a really good way to cut them down to finish your opening so that you can retreat safely. So here I'm going to perform the Chotwe Bangjukse, or the initial retreating posture, or as I like to say, the retreating posture to the right. And this here is the Jetwe Bangjukse, the secondary retreating posture, or the retreating posture to the left. So when do we do the Tue Bang Juk Se? Well, it's sort of in the name. It's a retreating posture that's used for retreat. In the Jeot Kune Turo, then all of the times when you move backwards, you're using this form. And so it's a really good way to move backwards in a battlefield and open a pathway for retreat, because you just need to spin and not focus on the attack, and you got pretty good mobility while spinning and just driving back enemies, because they see a spinning sword on a battlefield where the focus is everywhere and they will scram and get out of the way. Now, because there's less of a focus on offense, then rather than using downwards cuts or rising cuts or vertical cuts, then I think horizontal cuts work really well, because you get as much horizontal spinning cutting distance so that more people see your sword and try and move out of the way than you would if you did a downwards cut. And that way then you don't really need to worry about the power, you're just trying to get out of enemy territory. Now, this is very much a battlefield form, because in a duel then one person's attention is focused on you and there's no other attackers, so if you want to move backwards you can just move backwards facing them. But on a battlefield where everyone's attention is everywhere and there's multiple enemies, if you want to move backwards, you don't want to move backwards into someone else's blade. So by spinning this way, then you drive them back as you move backwards as well. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Chotue and Jetue Bang Juk Se. Now, please do practice them safely using a bokken, and every now and then it's fun to practice a battlefield form like the Chotue Jetue Bang Juk Se and the spinning Kyuk Juk Se, because in today's day and age we have a heavy focus on sword dueling in sports swordsmanship, and so battlefield forms often go forgotten and unused, and it's nice to hold on to these as something that once were quite relevant and quite useful. If you haven't checked out our document down below, please do check it out. In it then you'll find the form of Jeolkum as it's practiced today in Korea, but in a lot more detail than you'll find in other English translations of Murye Dogo Tongji. You'll also find my interpretation of the form and its stances. Now, this document is completely free, and please do share it with your friends, because I made this document to make the Jeolkum form a little more accessible in the English speaking community. So please check it out and give this video a like and subscribe if you can. And with that, I'll see you on the next episode.